فتحين تحرس ليلن أديوما بممرو مثنويو نعم فعل أتعير بار أوثر أتعير وحزيل العلمو كمو ناهير شلام الأرخيني مخبه لها ملومات قامايا تخويادة عطوراي غيور Assyrian Confederation of Europe. اليو طبخ سينوكا تهيلو خنديو لخا بسيما يبقى أسيريا تيفي برسخزت أسيريا تيفي كلا بلاخب أو يوثامن آن بيسا برسيلة أوا لومادا بكما يماني وقدمي هاوي برستا خايا الفيسبوك assyriatv.org و آن بيسا البرسخزت
Shlama. Welcome to the first day of the Assyrian Convention. Welcome in Sweden for everyone who is from abroad. And we hope that this convention will come up with good results and open doors towards a better situation for Assyrians. And we also hope that you will enjoy yourselves and enjoy your stay. We also welcome everyone watching us on Assyria TV or NBA.
هذه بشارك في شقامة Assyrian Convention of Europe طبخ من ريشة خيادة بتأكي لخا أوضا مشارينا بنشيو قاموا Assyrian Convention of Europe طلبينا من ريشة ندحو يودي ما أفروث أوروبا الدوثن لكي وطلبينا معاملا تشومع أحازوية شمعينا وحزينا إكو بنوطر
My name is Rain Hannah, and it is truly an honor for me to moderate this evening's panel on the Assyrian Global Governance Initiative. Before we begin our presentation, I would like to introduce to you our panelists, Mr. Michael Uesch here from Canada, a man you all know, of course, very well, Mr. Ephraim Jacob, and Mr. Mardin Isaac, who's here from London. We'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the Assyrian Confederation of Europe for organizing such a wonderful conference and giving us the platform to have this important discussion. As you all know, for the first time in our history, the majority of Assyrians currently reside outside of what is considered our traditional homeland. As the crisis continues to unfold in the Middle East and the very existence of Assyrians is threatened, we in the diaspora are confronted with a series of choices and decisions, and chief among them is the question, how can we survive? For centuries, we have sought the answer to this question outside of ourselves, and what we've come to realize with time, however terrifying or discouraging the realization may be, is that we are on our own. And when we are brave enough to accept this fact, we will also realize that the responsibility lies with each and every one of us to secure a future for our people, if we believe in one. And with that realization that self-reliance is critical to our survival, will be the recognition of our own strength and our own potential. And with that said, I would like to turn it over to Michael Uesch. Michael is an Assyrian scholar and advocate who has worked extensively on issues of governance and security, specifically in relation to the Nineveh Plain in Iraq. He is an expert on questions of legislation and advocacy in the context of American-Iraqi engagement and has led and coordinated efforts by the Assyrian community in the United States over the past decade. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Michael Uesch.
Mishora Vainamin Basimarav Achetan Lacha from Ephraim Jacob and the Assyrian Confederation of Europe. It really is a privilege and an honor to be here. And I really want to thank all of you for coming and taking this very important step. I also want to thank one of the drivers behind Assyrian global governance in terms of recognizing the spirit for it and the need to support it, Mr. Ninos Turnian from ANB SAT. And as you'll see in my presentation as just an example of what Ganan Kaganan looks like, I also want to say thank you to Ravi Johnny Yaku, who's here from Atra in terms of the NPU, and the work that we're doing in terms of the Nineveh Plain Defense Fund and the NPU. And you'll see why I bring this, because it touches into the presentation that we're developing. Sapere Ode is a Latin term. from the first book of letters, from Horace. It actually helped fuel the Renaissance. And it loosely translates into dare to know. Have courage in the face of the truth, because we don't always like the truth. And when we don't like the truth, we kind of switch off, or we only look for selective truths, truths that reinforce what we want to hear. And my message for well over a year and a half now has been that we must shake ourselves out of this illusion. Assyrian global governance is the process of moving away from it with the courage in the face of the truth, or sapere ode. We must accept that for over 100 years of discussing genocide, experiencing genocide, studying genocide, the one thing that we've never looked at is our own actions during a century of genocide. And I would say that we've invested for 100 years in a failed methodology. And this is what we must begin to accept, that for 100 years, the Assyrian nationalist agenda, as how it's mobilized and organized itself, has been in pursuit of a completely failed structure. We all know the famous book. I'm going to assume we all know. I grew up with a book that my uncle brought home for me from Chicago when I was a child actually. The Assyrian Question, Professor Joseph Jacob's book. I grew up on that book, among others. The Assyrian Question actually is a term from the League of Nations onwards, because there was a committee to resolve the Assyrian Question. Other countries, the great powers, Western nations, would decide our fate. That is the Assyrian Question as foreign determination, and that's how we're hardwired. The courage to accept the truth will lead us to the Assyrian Question as self-determination. We must break out of Assyrian organization and mobilizing for Westerners and others to save us. They never have. We must start to organize to help ourselves. So, building off of the comments by Afram, ACE is established to engage Western governments, and we're not saying we disengage from Western governments, but my emphasis is on the latter part, self-help. And just very quickly, as I go through this, I'll go into detail in terms of the United States government. In Sweden, whereas Afram says, we have the largest demographic concentration of Assyrians, actually over 1%. And yet when you engage the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for a policy of direct assistance, the answer is no. Years ago at the House of Commons, we had an extensive debate on the Nineveh Plains. No action from the UK government. An EU non-binding resolution on genocide recognition. What did it result into? What did it produce? Nothing. The Assyrian Question is foreign determination in the United States. Resolutions, legislation, direct policy action that I'm going to elaborate for you now, but in conclusion, you'll understand that the result has been not only zero, in fact, we've actually harmed ourselves through some of these policies. I'm only doing a short summary here because the latter part of my presentation is for ACE, is for the audience on Assyrian global governance. In 2008, appropriation bill, historic, $10 million targeting ethnic and religious minorities in the Nineveh Plains. This is unprecedented legislation. In fact, over the next 4 years, we appropriated $42 million. Did we benefit from it? Most of the money went through the Kurdistan Regional Government and was actually used to oppress us financially. In 2012, that's on the humanitarian side, in terms of humanitarian aid and development program. The monies that we appropriated were actually used to oppress us. In 2012, we developed an agenda for the Nineveh Plains province, and it actually passed into legislation. The committee directs the Department of State to submit a report not later than 90 days after the enactment of this act detailing U.S. efforts to help these communities, including assistance consistent with Article 125, assistance in building an indigenous community police force in the Nineveh Plains, and efforts to support NGOs in the region. None of it was implemented. In 2015, actually passed in June 2014, when there was no official Assyrian lobby in Washington, D.C. We didn't even need to be there. And they passed legislation for a Nineveh Plains administrative province. But imagine, nobody was there to make it happen physically, because these are words on paper now. These are words on paper. In 2008, after our security forces were dismantled in 2006 again by the Kurdistan Regional Government, in 2008 we finally got progress to unblock the order to create a formal security force in the Nineveh Plains. The Interior Ministry issued the order in 2006. Then Congressman Kirk, now Senator Kirk, then Congressman Kirk unblocked the order politically in Washington, D.C. to create our force and start a process. The goal was to reach upwards of 5,000. But by August 2008, the KDP-controlled Nineveh Plains province issued an order dismantling the force, reassigning it, taking it apart, and the United States military force on the ground watched it happen and didn't intervene on our behalf. And now let me come to U.S. recognition of genocide. We all know on March 17, 2016, Secretary of State John Kerry said, "My purpose in appearing before you today is to assert that in my judgment, Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups and areas under its control, including Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims." That was March 17th. The same day, Department of State officials said that the finding, genocide recognition, an achievement, imposes no new obligations beyond what is already being done, but that it could galvanize other countries to step up the battle against the Islamic State. So in the same breath that the State Department, the US government recognized genocide, they said, but this doesn't create any new obligation for action on us. In fact, we're already doing our part. We hope other countries do something. We have proven, again from the State Department, on the same day, we have proven our willingness to step in and prevent acts of genocide. Moving on, is it going to trigger something new? No. They recognize genocide, but they don't see it as an obligation to do anything more than what they're doing. This is the result of lobbying. This is the result of that advocacy. We have to begin to acknowledge these truths. The next two slides basically indicate that whether it was Rwanda in 1990, don't think that the Americans not acting is because we're Assyrians. In 1994 in Rwanda, the same message. Recognition of genocide imposes no obligation on the United States government. 2004, Sudan, the recognition of genocide imposes no new obligation on the United States government. And yet, we poured all of our advocacy efforts into genocide recognition. But let's take a historical perspective on this. When I say this has been a failed model for a century, what you're looking at now is a letter exchange between Marshamun and Sir Francis Humphreys, representative of Her Majesty from the United Kingdom. In this letter exchange, Sir Francis Humphreys says, "Your Beatitude, I have forwarded to the Secretary of State the Assyrian petition of the 17th June, and the British government are now in communication with the League of Nations Secretariat with a view to arranging for its early consideration by a competent League body. The Assyrian question as foreign determination in 1932. Marshamun wrote back to Sir Francis Humphreys, and I'll only summarize here. Your Excellency, and what this exchange was about was the levies, our security forces. The British were saying, we want your levies to stay with us in the center and in the south. And Marshamun is saying, I will only do that if you consider our national petition at the League of Nations, because my people are insecure in the north. Their fighters, our fighters, want to go back and protect their villages, protect their families. But Marshamun said, I will promise to do my best in persuading the leaders to consent and the levies to prolong their services if Your Excellency will write and assure me on your honor that you will consider our proposal. What is the answer? Sir Francis Humphreys writes, Your Beatitude, I have received your message of the 25th of June. It is my duty to explain that some of the demands contained in the national petition of the 17th of June appear to be in conflict with the declared policy of my government and the League. I undertake to support to the best of my ability with my government and the League of Nations those demands which appear to be reasonable and in conformity with the general policy of my government and the League. Your sincere friend, Francis Humphreys. What happened in 1933? Everyone? The Simele massacre. And our faith was in the Assyrian question as foreign determination. In 2007, one of the pieces of legislation we passed, you can see it in other presentations, was a report that the United States government, that the State Department was obligated to deliver about our plight. And in it, what do they write? In Nineveh, the Christian minority faces considerable hardship. Some factions are underrepresented politically. Some suffer from uneven. What does that mean, underrepresented politically? It means they were aware that the Peshmerga entered District Nineveh, collected the ballot boxes, and brought them back in the evening full. That our independent political groups were not represented fully. Some suffer from uneven resource transfers from the Kurdistan Regional Government's Ministry of Finance. Through Finance Minister Sergis Aghajan, the State Department in 2007 was aware that we were being socioeconomically persecuted. And some experienced human rights abuses, physical harm, with the KRG controlling the area. But what was their finding? On the basis of relative need, it would be inappropriate to single out this group for special attention. 1932, your demands are unreasonable. It's not in the interest of Her Majesty's government. And in 2007, this is the Assyrian question as foreign determination. And what amazes me, and what my message to the Assyrian people is that we have only demonstrated faith and steadfastness in the Assyrian question as foreign determination. What is faith? Faith is belief that is not based on proof. We believe in foreigners saving us, in foreign salvation, in the absence of proof. In fact, we've only had proof that it doesn't work. When will we come to accept this? When will we come to understand that the Assyrian question as foreign determination has left us destroyed? And that we have been steadfast. The definition of steadfast is fixed in a direction, unwavering. Despite repeated lessons from 1932, from 1914, until the present, 100 years later, we are fixed faithfully and steadfastly on the Assyrian question as foreign determination. Let me very quickly tell you what Assyrian global governance is not. Assyrian global governance is not the Assyrian Universal Alliance, which was established as part of its principles to diligently advocate the Assyrian cause internationally, urging democratic governments and international bodies to act. It is not the International Confederation of the Assyrian Nation, developed as an idea by Rabbi Ivan Kakovich, who said at the core of it is the Assyrian case presented to the international community. And it is not the current push under the Assyrian parliament, which seeks to create an entire representative assembly, but to do what? The Assyrian question as foreign determination. Assyrian global governance is the reorganization of the Assyrian nation globally to begin developing and exercising self-help self-reliance. It is only when we start working to help ourselves. This is an unexplored option that we might begin to achieve results. So for now, Rain, how am I doing for time? 3 minutes? For now, I'm going to take that as 6. For now, I just want to introduce you to principles, sharwe, mabadi, of Assyrian global governance. We heard fantastic explanations on the need for ACE, and I agree with all of them in terms of it is about structuring and organizing our people on a European scale. We have to support this. It is an essential measure. But all governance structures need to be guided by principles. Let me give you an example. I work in constitutional design, institutional design. My contracts overseas were about designing parliamentary systems. They have to be guided by principles. The US Constitution is guided by principles before they wrote the articles. What is one of them? Very simple. Large groups in control of power do harm to smaller groups. America is created by people who fled this place, who fled Europe. They were minorities persecuted by majorities with lots of centralized power. So one of the things they learned as a principle is if you put too much power in a large majority's hand, it will hurt others. So they developed institutions, but with that principle in mind. So for example, checks and balances between Congress, in the Senate and the House of Reps, separation of powers, the judiciary from the president from Congress. These we look at as just systems, as structures, but they're guided by fundamental principles. So what are some of the principles that should guide, in my view, Assyrian global governance? Autonomy or sovereignty. Here I'm talking about decisional autonomy. The capacity for Assyrians to make decisions for themselves. That is autonomy. Now, what does this mean? I can tell you the principle, but I have to illustrate it for you. So, for example, the Kurdistan Democratic Party created a political party called Mejlis Shabi. They created it. It is the creation of Nukhraya, of others, for us. In essence, this group does not possess decisional autonomy. It cannot make decisions for itself. Others make decisions for it. So the idea of autonomy or sovereignty as a principle would preclude that type of entity. This is not something specific to Assyrians. In the United States government, it is illegal to accept foreign campaign contributions. Why? Because the Americans didn't want Nukhraya influencing their politicians. Why should we not operate on the same premise? If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. Ganan Kaganan, Assyrians for Assyrians. We are on our own. The Assyrian Federation of Sweden is a federation we should all be proud of. It has fantastic leadership. It has built itself up. And then the government of Sweden stepped in to engage them. But it is when Assyrians started working locally, aggressively, and building strength that foreign governments came in. We're not saying that we reject foreign interaction. But it must come on terms when we're building ourselves up, under the principle of Ganan Kaganan. The Nineveh Plains Protection Unit is an example of the same. It is an effort started by our community, started by our people, built up by our community, but then what happens? Combined Joint Task Force Operation Inherent Results says, look at this group, they are doing something, our interests align with their interests. This is not happening because of their love for Assyrians or their love of Deshret Nineveh. A great power, the United States, is saying, here are people who we share interests with, they're doing something for themselves, we can work with them. It's a partnership. But it starts when we start helping ourselves. Ganan Kaganan. Indigeneity. We are an indigenous people. We are nationalists, but let's remember there are different forms of nationalism. The nationalism of Europe has a tremendously ugly history. It has fueled world wars. We don't have to be bound by that version of nationalism. Our nationalism, our indigeneity is about a nationalism of reclamation, it's been called. About taking back what's ours, taking back even our dignity. For example, to illustrate what I'm talking about, a standardized education that's global. So I would also like to recognize Malfono Afram Yildiz, who's here, who's devoted so much time and energy to an entire education curricula that can guide us as an Assyrian people globally. And yet we also have Atra. It's about land return and resettlement. It's not about taking land from other people. It's about taking back land that's been taken from us. Non-territoriality. We have, this is another principle, just as an illustration. We have indigeneity in Atra. It is about our land. It is Assyria. It is occupied Assyria. But we also have a huge diaspora. And we have to build in on this principle that sometimes the necessities in Atra and the necessities in diaspora require a filter. We cannot cross-contaminate. We cannot hurt one at the expense of the other. Let me give an example here. Again, another illustration. In 2003, a historically significant conference took place to declare the need to carve out territory in the Nineveh Plains as a federal unit, a subnational federal unit. Now, in pursuit of that political strategy was a very prudent policy. We are one nation, unity, Chaldo-Assyrian, an effort to bridge divides across sectarian groups and identity, fusing identity together to produce an agenda for the Nineveh Plains. But we can say that in diaspora, the agenda in Atra had a confusing effect, sometimes a harmful effect on organizations in the diaspora. We have to develop, it doesn't mean that what happened in Atra is bad. It means we have to develop systems and institutions that are guided by an awareness on non-territoriality and territoriality, that maybe what's good for Atra needs a system to filter to the diaspora, to shield the diaspora. And maybe what's good for diaspora is not always good for Atra. We have to design institutions that establish immunity for each other, but always pursuing shared goals for the bigger picture. These are fundamental principles that should guide Assyrian global governance. So what are the next steps? We are meeting in Spain in terms of all governance areas that can bring us together, that are interests in Atra and in diaspora, but we are seeking a mandate. This will not proceed without a mandate from the Assyrian Confederation of Europe, from national federations, from local organizations, affiliated and non-affiliated. This has to be a message internalized by our Shotapuyate, because that's our infrastructure. The federations, the confederations, the local associations in diaspora are the infrastructure on which to build. After Spain, an extended Assyrian global governance mandate via greater organizational consolidation. So the creation of a confederation and strengthening a confederation can only be good for global governance. In fact, they're interdependent. What is the long-term vision? The long-term vision is not the Assyrian question as foreign determination. Eventually, building up that Assyrian strength, that Assyrian power, where it is the Assyrian Question Resolution Council. It is not London, Washington, Geneva, Brussels answering the Assyrian question. It is Assyrians answering the Assyrian question. Thank you very much.
Next, we'll hear from Mardine Isaac. Mardine is an Assyrian writer and researcher from London, England. He studied English literature at Cambridge University and Syriac Studies at Oxford University. He has written and spoken widely on the Middle East over the past 2 years with a focus on Assyrians. Please join me in welcoming Mardine.
Hello? How you know about Sima Bichadi Yuka Bichadan or Kadawa Psasa Katanzuna Menochem? It's a privilege to have your attention. My goal, our goal in the time that we have, is to impart two central ideas, which I think are two sides of the same reality. The essential two sides of the same reality, the essential reality facing the question of our existence as an Assyrian nation. The first is to thoroughly unmask the idea that our salvation lies in external advocacy, and moreover that our attachment to the hope that our salvation will come externally is actively harming us and preventing us getting to our second thesis, from realizing the necessity of developing our own self-reliance and self-empowerment in order to survive as a people. This condition can be framed in terms of what we might call Assyrian exceptionalism, which is a curious mixture of self-loathing and self-regard. Self-loathing because we don't really believe, or act as if we do believe, that we can do anything truly meaningful or lasting for ourselves and by ourselves, or that we should focus on developing our own capacities as a matter of urgency in response to our ongoing genocide. And self-regard, because we continue to believe, or act as if we do, and in terms of precious time and energy spent, those two things mean the same thing in practice. That the justness, righteousness, the legitimacy of our cause should, and therefore will, attract support from the Chraya. This underpins the many myths that have been constructed within and about ourselves. We are very keen to internalize and accept every excuse that is given to us by foreigners for not helping us. One such excuse, for example, that we're all familiar with, is disunity. If you just take a cursory look, however, at causes supported currently by the United States and the West, and I'll give one example, and I won't go into too much political detail because I think everyone here will be very familiar with it, is the Syrian opposition. The Syrian opposition to Bashar al-Assad, if it could even be called one thing, is fragmented into hundreds of militias, perhaps over 1,000, absolutely disunited operationally, ideologically, in terms of patronage, and so on. And yet, it's common to hear Assyrians still say that, for example, the fact that some groups use other names other than Assyrian when presenting our case to Western powers is the reason that they don't take us seriously. So contrast claims over that confusion with what's happening with the Syrian opposition in relation to the West. Simply because their interests are aligned, they're supporting a cause which is deeply, deeply fragmented. So it simply isn't empirically true to say that our lack of unity has prevented us from attracting support. And yet, sadly, we continue to injure ourselves by perpetuating this belief within our people. That the real variable is us, but not what we do to empower ourselves, but the variable how we present our case to foreign powers. Whether it's which names we use to describe our people, which names we use to describe our land, the way we approach our relationships with politicians, the degree of our professionalism, and so on. So we look at examples of self-help that have led to the empowerment of peoples and causes and dismiss them without examining them meaningfully, instead jumping to the conclusion that the variable in their success has been lobbying, because some of these causes are involved in lobbying and appear to be good at it. As Michael has shown, it's also true that we have succeeded in producing results within the terms understood by advocacy itself: legislation, language, even policy. What has failed as a result of this advocacy to actually help us. And this shows that there are two tiers of reality when it comes to international affairs and sponsorship and advocacy and all the things that comprise and underpin the relation between states. There's the world of language, the world of seminars, journalism, institutions, and so on, resolutions, and the world of how things actually work on the ground, in which the absence of mechanisms and structures of self-reliance can often render the process of external engagement null and void. So to reiterate the most important point, It is only and until we realize that we are truly alone that we will take the extremely difficult steps necessary to maximize the assertion of our agency as a response to the conditions that we find ourselves in. What distresses us is that we have suffered so greatly without developing not only the instincts for survival, but that we are bereft of the institutions and the organizations that are the fruits of those instincts. Our reaction to ISIS, for example, to take the most pressing and recent example, was to pursue with even more vigor the very means that have left us vulnerable, namely more advocacy. Both because it is so deeply rooted in our psyches, and because our lack of transnational development forced us to. This approach shows itself most agonizingly in the case of Syria, as a country previously which was resistant to lobbying. It was always an autarky, it was a closed country. And as international conflict developed within its borders, and the fate of the country became truly a zero-sum game of violent, every man for himself survival, the need for direct assistance and support to our people, as opposed to governmental advocacy in order to survive, was made even clearer. And yet it was almost entirely absent in our case. To consider something like genocide recognition, I want to go back to this because it is a deeply significant moral point. I mean, there's nothing more fundamental, no fate more fundamental that a people can undergo than genocide. And these comments are totally impersonal because I, like everyone else who's been involved in Assyrian affairs, has been involved in the pursuit of genocide recognition over the last year or two. But there is something perverse about it. Why? When we know what happened and is happening to us is genocide, and we know that genocide recognition does not entail action, are we so keen to pursue it? On the one hand, we are measuring the weight of the simple opinion of Nefraya, specifically those in developed Western countries that we look to as paragons of virtue, over our own. And on the other, we are continuing to labor in the belief that the actions of Western governments will morally align with the profundity of our cries to them. It sounds to me to say that there's a combination of vanity and masochism in this, which Michael's examples showed how deeply rooted this mentality is within us, that even when those governments themselves were saying that we're not going to do anything, in other words, even though genocide is the most serious thing, and we recognize that according to international agreements and so on, it doesn't compel us to act. We actually held them in higher regard than they held themselves, which is very saddening and distressing and absurd. There is no model or precedent for what we are currently doing as a nation in an organized sense that has yielded results. And there are significant precedents for self-reliance that we might believe are down to lobbying successes, but were very empirically and clearly down to self-reliance and self-empowerment. I mean, the three most pertinent ones are Jews, Armenians, and Kurds. I mean, to take three local examples. And of course, our part of the world is unusually numerous when it comes to threatened peoples. In the case of these causes, Jews, Armenians, and Kurds, finally, after incredible struggle, their own people made their causes strong enough to deal substantially with external forces. It was not given to them, nothing was given to them until they empowered themselves so much they were able to assert themselves in a way which forced other people to take them into account. And crucially, these peoples could then afford to absorb the blows of betrayal and inconsistency which followed from their engagements externally. We haven't been able to absorb those blows due to our lack of internal capacities and legitimate transnational institutions purposed towards and relentlessly active in the pursuit of self-reliance. The establishment of the Assyrian Confederation of Europe, which has the potential to be one of the most significant moments in our recent organizational history, should take these lessons into account and not serve merely as a vehicle for the unity of existing bodies or communities, but orientate the entire Assyrian nation towards a design in which standards and principles of nationalism are enforced institutionally. I would like us to all think about the almost innumerably vast number of ways in which the citizens of countries, i.e. territorially bound countries, almost by virtue merely of existing within that state, reinforce and enable each other to survive and flourish. To give a very childish and basically outdated example, but it serves some kind of illustration. Taxes go to public universities, which train engineers, who build bridges across which you drive. That's a banal illustration, but it's merely intended to convey a state of collective being that I wish to see with Assyrians, where every organizational success, every individual success, every project success, indirectly or directly, empowers and assists and substantiates all other efforts globally. We're all here because we love our people, but we're also aware that the basis of nationalism is deeply instinctive and survival-oriented at the root. In terms of how we behave and think in relation to one another and other people and Nukhraya, we know that no one can help us but us. We all feel that necessity, that survival instinct, individually and socially and familiarly, but we don't organize along those lines. And that gap between our instincts, our internal knowledge, and our reality as a people, our organizational reality, our collective reality, is why there is an extraordinary waste of Assyrian potential in current existence, and why there is so much distress and exhaustion in relation to our work. In providing this vision of what we might call Shultanuta ad la Ara, sovereignty without land, the empowerment, the assurances, the undergirding of a state without being attached to territory. And when I say ad la Ara, Shultanuta ad la Ara, this idea is not at all about giving up on land. No Assyrian could ever abandon our attachment to Assyria, our attempts to reclaim what is ours, or to sever our ties with our land, which is not only the root but the source of replenishment for our culture, or the permanent dream of a free Assyria. It is a response, a necessary one, to successful genocides against us on our own land. We've had our agency taken from us by force in the Middle East, and we have also willingly handed our agency over to Nukhraya, with our expectation that they will come to our salvation because our cause is just, we deserve it, and because they are powerful. It is a response to the knowledge that if we are to meaningfully support efforts for us to remain in Assyria, to return to Assyria, or to survive outside it, and all three of these aspects should be supported by institutions simultaneously and in a mutually reinforcing way, it's all down to us to do so. Once we have an organizational reality that actually understands, takes into account, and fully empowers us based on our reality as a global nation, that will forever serve as the means by which we maximize the strength of our connection to each other, and will allow us to transcend the illusion that even our homeland diaspora divide will gradually destroy us. We've undergone decades, if not centuries, of being destroyed and uprooted, having our land, our culture, our people taken from us, our dignity taken from us. And we continue to lack the belief that we ourselves have the power and the freedom to rely on ourselves for survival. But if we finally build our own self-reliance and empowerment, because we have made it by and for ourselves, no one can take it from us. But that also means that if we fail to realize the necessity of self-reliance and self-empowerment as the only thing that can guarantee our existence and, we hope, our flourishing, only we are to blame for it. Thank you.
And for our last speaker on our panel, we have Mr. Afram Yaqub. Certainly needs no introduction for those of you here in the room. He's the current president of the Assyrian Federation of Sweden, an organization that boasts upwards of 10,000 members. Under Afram's leadership, the organization has been reformed and has grown to become one of the most powerful Assyrian organizations in the world. Please join me in welcoming Afram.
You put a lot of pressure on my shoulders. I have to deliver. This is a very interesting topic. Me and Michael especially have been discussing for long discussions on the Viber and Skype about these principles and Assyrian issues. And actually, as far back as I can remember, all the Assyrians I've known have been waiting for a Makhlusono, Furqono, Furuqo, a savior. I think my mother waited or is waiting for Jesus to save us. My father was waiting for George Bush to save us, or Putin, and other Assyrians I know have perhaps believed that Obama will save us, and still other Assyrians I know believe that the United Nations will save us, and other dear friends might think that the European Union will save us, and the list goes on. It's a kind of psychological sickness to live your entire life thinking that someone else will save you. I don't know if it can be explained by psychologists that it has something to do with the genocide trauma, that you inherently believe that you are weak and you cannot change your situation on your own. Perhaps it has a source from genocide, I don't know. But it comes from somewhere. And this belief that we cannot change our own situation on our own, we must have a savior, is hurting us, I think, more than Daesh. It has hurted us more than the Turkish genocide, more than the actions of Kurdish groups, more than anything else. I think this is what is killing us as a nation. It is making today thousands, hundreds of thousands of Assyrians totally passive. They are totally passive because they are convinced that we cannot do anything for our situation on our own as long as a superpower doesn't come and help us. I work on a daily basis with Assyrian issues. I meet a lot of Assyrians from Sweden and abroad. And I can say for each Assyrian I meet who is ready to be active, to do something, I meet at least 10, 20, 50 Assyrians that are passive and more or less laugh me in the face. You know, you're just a dreamer, an idiot. You believe you can do something, that we can do something on our own. I think most of us here can relate to that. So I will not speak on this for too long, because I think we all want a debate. We want questions from the public. But to change the minds, to begin with the minds of active Assyrians, so that we are all on the same page, that we can and must and should do something on our own. And that, as Michael said, for hundreds of years, the only thing actually what we have done is beg. We are begging for help. And each time, the proof is that each time it doesn't help, no one comes to save us, and still we continue to beg. So we have to do this paradigm shift in our own minds, that perhaps a little bit of begging or lobby is good, it's nothing bad, but the majority of the focus, the majority of the activism, the resources must be invested in ourselves, for ourselves. Menayna elena, ganan kaganan. So in Europe, I am pretty sure that we have around 500,000 Assyrians. I think in Sweden we have at least 150,000, in Germany at least 150,000, already up to 300,000 in two countries. We have France, we have Switzerland, we have Austria, we have Denmark, a lot of other European countries. So if you count all of these together, we surely have 500,000 Assyrians. And a very small percentage of those Assyrians today are active, believe that they can do something. Most of them, maybe up to 90%, are totally passive. They just want to live their lives, they don't care, they don't believe that they can play a difference. In my vision, the Assyrian Confederation of Europe spearheads the transformation of the minds of these Assyrians, the majority of these 500,000 Assyrians. So they become full of self-belief, active on a local level, national level, and on the European level, to have one of the strongest diasporas from the Middle East in Europe. We're certainly one of the biggest ones in Europe, but we're not the strongest, one of the strongest right now. And from that strength, I hope it will reach all over to Assyria with full of energy to give our people in Assyria as well to continue the struggle. So it's all up in the mind, in the head. If you believe you can do something, then you will do it. Tawdi.
We're now going to open the floor up for
I want to thank you so much for pointing out the problem that we have today. I also want to ask you for another problem. I agree with you that we have a foreign enemy, but I've also come to discover, or I've grown to accept, that we have an enemy within ourselves too. What I'm speaking of, and I not long ago I posted this on Facebook, that because of this new allegation in Iraq, that members are going to be identified by their nationality, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, it's both Arab, Kurd, and Assyrian, if I'm not mistaken. The Armenian Federation of Sweden made an agreement with the World Council of Armenians, pointing out that they are excluded in this report. Am I doing wrong to point out that this is holding us back? To not agree that we are one people and we want the same thing. We want to live in our homeland, and we want to be able to go on with our traditions, educate ourselves, and so on. My question to you is that is this a problem that you agree with? That the Armenians or the Federation that speaks that we are not the same as Assyrians, we are not part of this group. Is this not something that you can agree on or not?
So I can absolutely tell you with 100% confidence that an initiative on Assyrian global governance reflects 100% unity. But what is the unity that I'm talking about? It is the unity that we are Assyrians, and Assyrians have national interests. It is not necessary in this agenda to go and build unity where unity doesn't exist and then do something. It is Assyrians working for Assyrians. Ganan Kayanan. I don't need any other division's permission to do this. I am helping myself for myself. Now, I genuinely believe that that can build greater unity when it proceeds and builds its strength. On what basis am I saying this? Without going into the specifics. I've seen people from our community in Atra follow one power to another. I won't even name the villages. I won't name the people. But I met people who were Arab Christians. They may move north, they became Kurdish Christians. That's not anything other than their survival instincts pushing them towards where the power resides. But that's because we've never tried to empower ourselves as Assyrians, to show people that they can be proud as Assyrians working for themselves. Mardin, I just want to use part of Mardin's presentation to illustrate how significant, how powerful this point is. When he talked about the Syrian opposition in terms of unity, this is the message we receive from foreign governments. Go get unified, and then we'll help you. This is what we're told. But what Mardin has explained to you is that it doesn't apply when the Americans have interests that they need to pursue. The Syrian opposition is the most fragmented entity out there. But the Americans still work with them. The Americans don't say, we want all 120 of you factions to get unified, and then we'll work with you. The Americans are working with them because they want to. This myth of unity, the illusion of unity, is something that outsiders actually impose on us. And so we actually believe we need to build something that no other nation is expected to build. I worked in Washington, D.C. for 5 years. I attended so many hearings and sessions. Let me tell you something now. I'm going to ask you, how many people in this room will raise their hand and say Americans are unified? Completely disunited. Completely disunited. One thing binds them is they will work for themselves. And it's time Assyrians started doing the same thing. Okay?
We'll go right here.
Shlama, I prefer to talk in Assyrian, that's okay. وقال إلى تخمنتي لأخني وخمشنا دير لبارا. أنا تخمنتي كنت أخني بشرب مشني وخمشنا. سب من the French Revolution البوشام وطني أطشا. بين ديلا يركناي بريش لقاتا من أمتا. إيمتر مشريفة أنا أطراف ركناي أزل قاموا مردني. أخي هذا ديا يختمشن لبارا وهم زوم في structure الكالخ شد آسم تناية نيشم تناية بس من كذا أخني كت أقبلني وخأمتا يوقصار من يانا من دي كما يوخ شخاية أخي مس مخمخ يانا نكمشن نجوا أفراد مدن خاص يخم شخاية والشوار وهم كل يوم مسلمانة أخي من دي تاي أختا بشارع رابع نجوار مخلايلو بشارع وخ مع الأسف على مدينة تلاقيلا لا أخم خذايا مدينة بيض من أفرا ثلث أزل خذايا إلى خذايا بريشة كل موافق أخني لا ذاك باش تمشي خايلة جوار تلاقي خم دي خينا خم تخيا إنها بيلا خالة قريت ترمي إنها ويا خلاني جواها ديموغرافي مليانة وزوزة أخني لا مليانة يتلن ولا زوزة يتلن إذن أخني ما ترشد آسم تناية فالخ بالخانة أشياء إنها دارت الأطرة لا تلوخ ناشد ياشا دارت الأطرة لا تلوخ زوزة وبسيقوا يولوب لا تلوخ زوزة قد خاف رقورة بقالك منه في مكادر بين يولوخ زوزة ين قال يولوخ منيانا مخ برداية فإذا أنا يتلا منيانا أمريكا يطلع في نفس يتلا منيانا أخير شو منيانا إذن هل كما ماسك فالخخ قدانا كريت مكدر أمدي مخ أمري إلى بحث العالمي جنيش الطلع جير الطلع تارك يعني أنا أثراين بروني قايم أثراين ليه النواي قايم أثراين لا إذا تلوخ مش من الطاقة بس
بقارة
أو بقاري دبر
يعني بقارخ إلى
بقاري إلى أوكي بقاري لا تخاف أخني بير كنت بانا شو آسيوم ثنائي دوس بانا كستركتور خاطر قوم تاع شوية خاطر أوكي أخني من يانا خدش الوقفة وأخب شارع أو مدخل داخلك لما تخلت مدانا فهمت لي ومترين أخي ديموغرافية إتلن ولا زوسة إتلن زين ماس بيش آسيوم ثنائي أفروات الخلانة مرير لنثل لا إيكونومي ولا من يانا
Basima Rava, and I'm going to answer in English. So, in any kind of roundtable discussion, I love comments like this, and this is something I hold just personally very dear. We need to have lines of communication where we can disagree with one another, and I disagree with some of your comments, but I still see us working in the same direction. Litlan Banyan, we don't have numbers, but as Afram just explained, actually, we have some numbers, we do have people, but as he also acknowledged, 90% of them are not engaged. They're disengaged. They've also internalized their victimization. Part of their disengagement is that they genuinely don't believe Assyrians can help themselves. They believe their people are helpless and therefore lack hope. The other thing is money. I have a two-part answer to that. So the question is not, do we have no people? The question is, how do we activate the people who are not there, who are disengaged? It is about raising their consciousness, raising their awareness. It's about restructuring. And as I said in my slide, Assyrian globalization is not, and this is, by the way, this is just a technical, it's not about a new organization. Assyrian global governance is not about a new organization. Assyrian global governance is about reorganization. We have the institutions, but all of them are structured. Let me be very frank. We just heard the panel on the Assyrian Confederation of Europe. And 90% of Akram's comments was about the European Union. Right? Now, I know he understands the need for self-help, but it's a paradigm shift, and that takes time. Okay? So it's about repurposing. In terms of Zuze, you're right. Only in the sense that we haven't seen the money. Not that we don't have money. I've gone to parties and I've seen lots of money. I've walked through parking lots outside of those parties and I've seen lots of money in the value of those cars. I've gone to suburbs in neighborhoods and seen lots of money in people's homes. The point is, the national cause doesn't have the money. People privately have the money. The money is there. The money is also there. Now let me illustrate. Let me not talk too abstract. Let me illustrate the potential that's there. Rabbi Johnny is sitting here from the ground up in terms of creating the Nineveh Plains Protection Unit. There wasn't a lot of money behind it. There wasn't. Okay? There are people's homes that have more value than the total expense of the NPU up to this point in time. But it was nationalist money for a nationalist cause. And with that small investment, the United States Special Forces came and said, we can work with you. Not because we love you, not because we even care about Deshte Ninwe, but that's because we want to kill ISIS and you want to get rid of ISIS, and you're helping yourself. We like that you're helping yourself. And so now we can work with you. And that's a small investment. Imagine what happens with a big investment. But we have to show people this. That's our obligation. Not everybody knows this. In fact, as Afram says, guaranteed 90% are not even looking for this knowledge, let alone hearing it and understanding the significance of it. So do you see where I'm saying? I disagree with you, but it's actually about more the potential, and that potential happens with reorganization. Our Shota Puyate, our organizations are geared towards the Assyrian question as foreign determination. Our nation has never built itself, has never developed itself that we're going to help ourselves. That's why I said one of my principles, to illustrate it, is about education. We need a standardized global education system. Not only that teaches Assyrians who they are, but teaches them that Assyria was built by a people who were oppressed. They were surrounded by oppressors. We were not born kings. We were not born queens. We made ourselves into that. We were surrounded by heinous oppressors. The Assyrian Empire was built. It wasn't given. We have to reclaim that identity. So I would even go beyond 200 years. I would say for thousands of years, we have been taught that we are necessarily under someone's foot. It is a victimhood mentality. But I will always say there are people who are not victims. This is not an absolute. We have Assyrians in Atra. We have Assyrians that are in diaspora that are not victims. When Ninos Turnian came to me from AMBSAT and he said, I want to work on something like this, there's a simple reason why I said, yes, we can work. It's because I recognize that here's a person, here's an Assyrian who's not a victim. That mental emancipation is already there. But what we need to do is organize as a people, as a nation, globally, where we remove ourselves first from that mental victimization. We learn that we have power. Then the numbers will materialize. Then the money will materialize. Because I would say the numbers and the money are there, but we have not developed ourselves to tap it.
I want to add some very short notes on what Michael said. Numbers first. The Jews, when they started rebuilding Israel and moving back to Israel, their numbers, percentage-wise, versus the numbers of non-Jews in the area that later became Israel, I mean, it was almost non-existent. It was almost empty of Jews. If you compare that to Assyrians today, our numbers compared to our neighbors, we are in a much better starting point from where the Jews were. And concerning the money, I can name 3 churches, 3 Assyrian Orthodox churches in Stockholm. The value of these 3 churches is 250 million Swedish kronor, a $250 million Swedish kronor. That's just 3 churches. Now, the Syriac Orthodox Church, Assyrian Orthodox Church in Sweden, has around 50 churches. And then add to that the Assyrian Church of the East. Add to that the Assyrian Chaldean Church. And then add to that all of our churches in Germany, Belgium, etc. If you do that calculation, you'll find there's a lot of money. We're talking about billions. It's just the question of where do we invest.
جوا برابكيريا بسورة زوزة إتلان إن لخ مفلو خدوس من يانا إتلان إن لنا فوخانا وإتلان زبوطة إن لخ بناي جانا تتمخي أخلا.
We'll take a few more questions. Sure. Anthony?
How do نسيب المقياتهم رابية فمتخذ قرارات في بنت باروكا ممتني لبطاية باروكا جانو بدار بس أخنا بهاو باروكا جانو نقول داينا عرباي لأمريكاي لشوكا كذا رابي مايكل مكين was جانا كجانا. But what about جانا درب جانا? What about the obstacles on the way of the Assyrian global governance? What about the statement of Syriac patriarchs demanding the recognition of Syriac identity in Iraq? What about the Louis Sabo's Chaldean League? What about the statement of Iraqi parliament saying that no more provinces will be decided in Iraq? What about the obstacles on the global governance?
I'll start from one of the comments you made at the end. By the way, because I think there's a very technical statement that you made, and I want to address it and then go back to the bigger question that you asked. First of all, Assyrian global governance is not about Deshtit Nineveh. Meaning, it's not created to create a Nineveh Plains province. Assyrian global governance, as it proceeds, is about Assyrians forever, everywhere. As Mardin Mere, that illustration that he gave about a citizen of a country goes to a public school, becomes an engineer, and builds bridges he's feeding himself, she's building her home, but she's an engineer in her country. Everything is towards a purpose, even when it's subconscious. That's Assyrian global governance. But coming to your question about the Parliament of Iraq making a statement, I would direct everyone to the interview, the excellent interview on Assyria TV that Rabbi Yonadam Kenna gave, explaining that it was not, by the way, so the motion was not put by our side, by our people on our vision. It was pushed by a Sunni Arab nationalist bloc and part of another agenda, and that agenda was rejected. And that agenda is not our nation's agenda either. Our agenda is not an ethno-sectarian, centralist agenda. It is a positive agenda, even positive for Iraq in terms of federalism and pluralism. So but I would say the answer to that question you can find in the interview that Rabbi Yonadam Kenne gave on Assyria TV. The ones who are derqul Ghanan, I'm sorry, but I'm picking up the same theme as the very first question that was asked. The disunity from again, I can't emphasize this enough. Assyrian global governance, part of the mandate is not to go out and convince somebody who doesn't believe they're Assyrian, who rejects Assyrian, to be Assyrian. It is Assyrians for Assyrians now proceeding. If they come, they come, but it's Assyrians working for Assyrians. For people who believe that they are part of this nation. Now, of course, there are questions about churches, unity, different sectarian groups, but this mission is as a nation. The disease of disunity is actually one that has prevented national progress because others exploit it. Now let me give you an example of that. Right now, the Kurdistan regional government has created 2 new political groups for one purpose, to exploit sectarian divisions to prevent our political progress in Deshtit Nimwe. Okay? And you know what helps that agenda? Do you know what helps that agenda that is created by the Kurdistan Democratic Party and the Kurdistan regional government? When we go and continue not building our own internal power, but go and debate others who are vested in those Nukhraye's interests. Nukhraye, Kurdaye, others, Arabaye, and as Mardin explained, Armenians in their time, Kurds in their time, and Jews in their time, they were never unified either. But a group within said, this is the national cause, and we're going to work on it. And we're not going to be distracted. There are people dealing with unity issues. I'm not going to get in their way. But I'm going to build my nation. I'm going to build my power. I'm going to invest in myself. Ghanan Qaghanan. And then I'll engage others. Then I'll deal with others. So I think the idea that somehow we have to be obsessed by those, and that's my point. Some of them are paid to make us stop working for ourselves and debate them. And it serves the Nukhraye's interest. It's a double shot. Okay, let's task people in our nation, and there are people in our nation having those debates. But what Assyrian global governance is looking at is, how do we organize ourselves, regardless of those who don't believe in us, to build our own power? That's essential. Okay?
إلى قصة إيتواتر إلى خمدي رابط كيان عيد قد ريشان إيتواتر باري بولاك بو أمتاشرة أي بداية وقاي قوي خمدي كيان عيد قانا قد خلنا خكانا قهار أو إلى هارو أخر إلى رابط صادق لقالي إلى خج دان لقرك أو إلى خج هيوي ينصورة بريشان إيتواتر يعني إيتواتر أخو بداية كان مصر قرف تشيته وبداية إلى كيانة إيتواتر Annie, they're pursuing their own power, and we have to pursue ours. It's very simple, I think.
Don't you love Assyrian with a British accent?
Unfortunately, we're running short on time, so we have time for one more question. I'm going to go to Rabbi Nina in the back.
Hey, thank you for this panel. I really enjoyed it. I don't know. I actually forgot it now, but first of all, I will start, if you may, if you allow me. Through recent history that we have witnessed, Afram gave example of the Jews, but East Timor, I think, is a perfect example. I mean, their number was very little, and relatively speaking, to Indonesia, and they were poor, but there was a resolve and determination and belief in their cause, Ghanan Qaghanan, as Michael said. And as we know, they with their freedom. Michael, the question of Ghana Ghana is not new actually. Like, I would like to recall one of the articles that an American journalist wrote whilst the Assyrians were in Bahoba refugee camp and the British were trying to enlist the Assyrians into the levy. He went searching for General Agapopoulos, and they pointed out, they said, he's the man there standing a bit to the side. And he said, I saw tears in his eyes, a broken man. And when I went to him and I said, you know, you were the great Agapopoulos, and what's wrong? He said, because I am sad, because these were supposed to be my troops fighting for me, not fighting for the British to keep the Iraqi borders. We must know the current borders of the modern state of Iraq were drawn, maintained by the Assyrian levies that served the British interest and by default the Iraqi interest. In a way, some might get upset, you know, like mercenaries really. But the question is, I want to ask about the global governance. To me, it's still a bit abstract. Is there some kind of structure to it? How do you see the structure to this global governance? If you could kindly enlighten us on that, I would really, really appreciate that. And I'm sorry for the wrong term.
I will answer your question, but I'm first going to address your okay. So please forgive this presentation in the sense that this presentation to the Assyrian Confederation of Europe is a culmination of a conversation. It's a progression. ANBSAT has been facilitating this journey in terms of presentations for over a year now. What I mean by that is, this is the third lecture in a series. So anyone who's interested, please come to me, get my email. I will send you the earlier lectures, because in the earlier lectures, I actually have a section on Agapopoulos. As the person, he was not alone, by the way, it was not just Agapopoulos. There were other commanders of Assyrian fighting forces during that period, but I use Agapopoulos as an actual pinnacle moment in our history where the paradigm shift took place. He represented one of the last contemporary modern phases of Assyrians for Assyrians, fighting for their national cause, and because of the historical circumstances, was also one of the first, because of the betrayal, who found himself at the League of Nations, starting our path into the Assyrian question as foreign determination. Rabbi, that's how significant that period of history is. So I want to draw attention that we addressed this in earlier lectures, and I agree with you completely. In terms of the structure, the detail, I work in constitutional design. I work in institutional design. One thing when you do that, and not in an abstract way. So, for example, one of my contracts, years past, was from the South African government. They said, we have some articles in our constitution that are not yet operationalized. They exist, but we don't have a process for them. So my contract was to take those principles, take those articles, and turn them into an institutional design. But here's the thing. First of all, there was principles behind those constitutional articles. Then those constitutional articles had specific principles to them, and then you build with them, but you build with the political interests, with the people there. I addressed that, but perhaps I didn't emphasize enough. So for example, our infrastructure for now are the federations, the confederation, and non-affiliated Shota Fuyate. This is just a starting point of an organizational structure. But you don't impose a model. This is about liberty. Most of the heads of these organizations, I guarantee you, still think the Assyrian question is foreign determination. It is a process to build them towards the Assyrian question as self-determination. And so that's why the first step that we're doing here with the Assyrian Confederation of Europe, its federations, and eventually down to the associations. I don't have the answers yet, but we have a mandate letter. This letter would be a declaration signed by the head of every organization, local to European-wide, to the Assyrian American National Federation. This step hasn't been taken yet. It's with this knowledge, this message that we're bringing, that we would say, we want a mandate from you for us to gather as experts. I said in Spain as a first meeting point. To gather in Spain to begin the process of engaging structural design, institutional design, but not to give you a model that you've agreed to. We need to give it to you, you need to consider it. We're not in a position to impose anything, and if you impose something, it'll fall apart. Now, I'm not one for copying. I don't like to copy, and that's not because I'm an academic and I've been told not to plagiarize. But there are powerful lessons in history. The United States of America. The United States of America was not born the United States of America. It originally came together as separate colonies. Those separate colonies came together under something called the Articles of Confederation. You know what? They were at each other's throats, and they were losing to their oppressors. Those colonies, those states got together and said, we need a group from every one of us to gather. They gathered in Philadelphia, and they developed a constitution. But those people who gathered had a mandate from their states. Now, we are a non-territorial people in diaspora. So we're going to use the existing infrastructure that we have and say, give us a mandate. So this is about this is about mental emancipation and then an agreement, an active process of mandating us to get together. So there is a mandate letter, and it will go to every organization, and it will request a mandate. And I know we won't get everybody. It's not about getting everybody. When I said we have 100% unity, it's because those who do come understand why, and there we'll build. They're already liberated when they say, yes, I'm signing on to this. And I understand why this needs to happen. Then we build on that.
I know there were more questions, but unfortunately that concludes our presentation today. However, both Michael, Martin, and as you know, Ephraim will be here the next couple of days. If you have questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them separately. We're going to take a short 10-minute break, and then we're going to return with the next part of our agenda, which is speeches by two of our guests of honor. So again, that'll be a 10-minute break, and then we're going to reconvene here. We want to thank you again for your attention and for
now we will hear speeches from the guests of honors. Rabbi Ninos Tiranian and Professor Ephraim Yaldis. We will start with Ninos. Papa.
أبيتون رابع باسيم قد جزويت لخ مجتهني شابيرا شولا لخ شوري لوخون بجزويت دبرانويت ميقرا أفرم ياقون أنا بغزايم وأني كما دانا قد سويدن ختم شغلات بيتاينا أنا شغلات الرابع شعبي قد خزيري من خد شغلانة قد أفرم ياقون قد بعدين وأنا خدنا ميديا شتسانة خدنا ميديا اللي أمتديا أيني كل دكان إلى وبغزايم وأنا شغلات قد لخا خزيري إنا رابع ميانة هيبي قأمتديا وقبل هذا أنا هروديوتية بن يعني من برزوجي بغداد رو بغداد قد لخا إيبن وخدتي رو يقول لك قد أخ كسخا بروفيسور كليبن قد كل هيبي قالوا إلى خينا بين تانن بنا يوروب لخا إن أخنن كلن خيدخ مويداله أطرايت قد إيكت إيوه الدنيا من أمريكا، من كندا، من أستراليا. من ده يوروب قد لخ شابرتا أخنو بندوتهم ساقولو دزويتا أنا بغداية من شروط قد ميوتون اللي تتلخى إلى خامن رابا أنا نقايا جو خيوتت داتيتت أمتديان قد بني أمتن جو أطرا بسبارنا قد أخنا من جالوتا من دن أطروات الماروة قد تيبا جو بتفاتن رابا راحت شولانا لخما بيخالوه خدارا بخداريوه أني أين الله بيلا قد أمسخ خهايارت هايراخرون أني قد أمسي بيشي جو أطرد أبعاتا قد خاقلتا أويا قد خايوما أويا أخنا خينا ديرا جو أطرد أبعاتا أويوما آبا قد شتسخلا state of Assyria خايا خيتا من بار تريقل في اجتماع شنة قد إمبراطوري كان بلتلا بخيلة أيضالة ودخت غزيلا هذه بانل قامتها من دي قامة يا جو خيوتا قد أخنا جري completely من جو تخمنتا شكلخلا مرة رابا الصوانة شكلخلا إلى قد victimization قد أخنا كل خامنا individual كل خال برصوفة جري شاكلا ويطلق ما خيلة اتن جابت كل خامنا جابدي رابا خيلة اتن جابت افرم يوضز بروفيسور لك كل يالك قد اخنا اتلان اتلو رابا خيلة جبارة كم صخ طيران مجوجخلون وكم صخ ماطخ الدون نيشن اصلايا قد خايا كيتا ديرخ الدين الدور شبرت اتفالا آتور قامتا وآدية احنا بانخلا من شارتا ولا تعنيتون خيلة لتلان لا تعنيتون منيالة لتلان لا تعنيتون زويزة لتلان كل خامن دي احنا بتشارخله وباصلتا بهذا القامة وبخيلة مريا بخيلة داون إنا بتخمنيات الجانب بدن وجابت قد global governance بد ما يعلن أليتوتا أنا بهيبي من يخادون روبرت شريتا كل خا وجابه بخزيتون له لا مريزخ بد أدخل أشولا تهزخ لقامة على هناطر كل أخون وخير على بنجتاني conference قامت للأخ كتير إن التري رابا طبخ منتية بكل خيلة تتفعلا لتأزغ لقامة أدي أنا ميكروفون يبنى ميقرأ أفهم يلبس
هاو ترى بس ملزع لي خاني ولك ليه لك بعد بكات أو ترى بسيمة وبانا كبنوا مغزن ما شهر غايت قبل طيبوتا دي لادي قريتا لادي كبشتا ولادي صويانا وعجبونا أتبلخونا تا إيقارا وتحبا أدأمتا ميقارتا. I'm shifting to English because there are so many people that probably are not so fluent, not only in Eastern dialect, but that's why. So thank you very much for the invitation. I'm happy, I'm honored, and I'm especially thankful for this invitation by the Assyrian Confederation of Europe to participate in a topic which is too close to my heart. So, and that's in reality the main reason why I'm here. But I'm not going to bore you with ideals and wishes and so on, but I'm very pragmatic, I'm very practical, and just mention you the possibilities we could deal with, we could work on in order to get a slight step, a path, to develop, to help, and to become what we are looking for, a nation, a people who is just trying to emancipate in two ways. From an ecclesiastical point of view, we are just starting to say, look, we have to work on our one. Wonderful idea. But how to deal with it? In which fronts and fields we have to work on? This is one of the main and most important point we have to discuss upon. And one of the things, because everybody should work in that field where he is effective. We Assyrians, and I'm one of them, I'm the first in this sense, we talk too much and we do too less. That I'm among my people, and I talk what I feel and what I have experienced for. So let's be very, very practical, very, very, simple in that sense. And that's why I'm just telling you a bit upon the possibilities we have been exploring. And tomorrow we will have a long talk about the Aramaic language, but not focused on its evolution, but focused on how we can use it in order to become one. And there are projects. And about what I'm really happy is the presence of the youth. The incoming generation is still now here. He's old. I'm a bit younger than him, but we have to look to the other, a bit younger generation who should be pushed, who should be supported. And this support is a very, very important point too that must be discussed here. So let's be very clear. There are so many fields. One of the fields where I'm working on is working on the education process. A people without a language can't become a people. Forget it. This is the first step. Don't ask for the territory. Don't ask for the different problems we have, inner problems. You belong to this church, and ask how your kid thinks. In what language he dreams. If your kid dreams in Assyrian Aramaic, then you can feel and you can be sure that you will become one mighty nation in the future. But if you don't achieve that point, forget other important projects. In this sense, we have started many years. It's about 21 years we have been working on different projects. At the university, at the state university, where we don't depend on the mercy of donation or whatever. This is a first step. We have to work out how many people are engaged at the state universities to cooperate, to work together. There are other initiatives like projects like Mara project. I don't know how many people have heard about that. And it's still in Sweden. And they have done a huge work. You know how many documentations are still there waiting for some mad guy like me who deals with the language, but he could deal like Thomas Bishop. He's been collecting during years a huge sum of material, but nobody has worked on. So we need educated people, a people without its basis, which must be based on language, history, and literature as first step. You can't convince the other governments, telling them, we were a mighty Assyria. Forget that. Other things works like Nina Lamasso is working on. Reviews, works written in our own language. I enjoyed it so much. I used them in my classes as exercises for my students. This is what we have to do. This is how we have to work. Sharing, first step, we haven't learned to share. We haven't learned to cooperate. We are really generous, yes. But somehow we haven't been able to, to put it on the way and to recreate what has been stopped a long time ago. I don't know, I'm not going to take more time. Tomorrow we will talk about these projects, these ideas, and what we are able to do is to be conscious of a fact. We are very limited from an economic point of view, from a political point of view, but we are powerful if we put our forces together. And this is what we have to learn, because we haven't given enough time to cooperate, to work together, because if we don't do it, no foreigner, as he's insisted, no foreigner will come and say, look, I'm giving you your nation back, I'm going to help recovering your language. I feel sadness each time I see that there are so few people dealing, for example, with the modern language or modern Assyrian language. Why? Because we have been depending always on the outsiders, of foreigners, Americans, English professors, Germans, French, and so on. And let's ask the question, and with this I will finish. Are we really convinced to be a nation? I'm absolutely convinced. And I hope that everybody who is here is convinced, but being convinced has its consequences. And let's work on those points that, exige a concept. When you get married, you're promised to be, no? And deal with your nation, with your patrimony, with your treasure in these terms of promise that is really even dropped not by a signature but by blood. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your precious words. Thank you. We will have a dinner now here, and then we will have a small gala. عضو كتانك شمتو بثرمينك كتان gala ناعمتو تودي لك وغلبة شهر ناعمة تودي